Thank you guys so much for doing this. I really appreciate it.
Of course.
You're welcome.
So we're just going to chat about the Amber Ruffin Show and late night and Seth's growing library of impressions, and we'll go from there.
Oh, good. We'll have some real honest assessment from Amber.
I wish I had glasses so I could go.
Well, my first question for you guys is about late night, and I was wondering if anywhere in the near or distant future do you foresee ever stop ragging on Scollins?
No. I mean, well, I think that's a question for Scollins, right?
Yeah.
I mean, is he going to change his behavior
to
the point that we won't feel the need to try to get him to change his ways?
I think that's fair. And maybe just keep having Joel McHale on.
Oh my God, Joel McHale ragging on Scollins, the best. It should be noted that I realized that Scollins was fair game when Amber also started ragging on him. Amber would never rag on someone unless they were so safely in the center of it. And once she unloaded, I realized, oh, this is total fair game.
Well, Amber, you did something that very few humans in history have ever done, which is create and launch a late night show during a pandemic. And I'm curious what that experience was like for you, because I was highly anticipating the show, but I was not necessarily expecting it to launch last fall, in the middle of all this.
It was very fun, because it came along right at the time where I was like, ooh, I would do anything to have an excuse to leave the house. And then I had one. And then I got to hang out with all my little friends outside of the house. It was absolutely, I feel like I entered some kind of cheat code. It was so great. But then also there was no audience. So I never, ever for 1 second felt like, oh, I'm doing a bad job, or, oh, I chose a bad joke, because no one's there. No one's there to not laugh. I think a lot of people are worried about, oh, well, you're missing all the sweet, sweet laughter from the audience. But what about the silence? That's what I was going to say. Yeah.
It's the truth. I can't believe more people don't appreciate that audiences can also make performers feel bad. like, by the way, when we tell a joke, we are ready. The laughter's inside of us. We thought it was funny. You can either tell us we're right or just kill the thing inside of us. I mean, with that said, I'm blown away that Amber did this without an audience, that she launched a show, because I would say if there's ever a time an audience is helpful, it's at the beginning. But I don't know. Are you desperate for them to come back, Amber?
I truly have a horrible memory and always have. And I'm honestly like, how was it again? What was it? I don't remember. I truly don't. And now in this new thing, I can't imagine an audience in it. I don't know. It's better. It's worse. I don't know.
I'm doing the Tonight Show tomorrow as a guest. And I'm fascinated what it's going to be like. I feel like when they laugh, my reaction is going to be, we're trying to have a conversation. Two people are talking.
I was going to ask about that, because I do honestly feel like both of your shows benefit from not having an audience now. And there's an intimacy there. And maybe it's just because I want to watch, it feels more insular or intimate, because you playing to Scollins or Shoemaker is funnier to me than playing to a general audience who maybe hasn't tuned in and doesn't know who Scollins is. And that joke is not going to land. And therefore you just kind of have dead air. But hearing two laughs in the back of the rafters is very funny to me.
It's very funny to me too. And I do think it has allowed us to build this weird cinematic universe of characters on our show. Up to and including Amber, who just during corrections is off camera. And the people who watch our show are very aware that it's Amber. And it is that thing of, I think the audience who came to our show, most of them knew our show. Most of them liked our show. Probably very few of them watched it every night. I think people who watch at home, there's a higher percentage chance that they're tuning in with regularity. And weirdly, that's always been the most important audience. And so I feel more connected to them than ever before, almost as a benefit. I feel like removing that proxy audience that came every night has made it like a direct path to the people at home.
So I know Colbert just got an audience back. Do you do you want an audience back? Are you planning on bringing an audience back? Are you pushing back against bringing one back?
We're not going to even consider it. I think the earliest we'd have it is September.
To that end of that intimacy and stuff, I spoke to you last year from your attic when you had just kind of launched those shows, which felt loose and silly, and I loved the quick pace of it. And it kind of radically changed how you guys had to do the show. And obviously then moving into the studio with no audience, it feels more loose and silly now. I was wondering for you, do you, or both of you, do you guys feel that difference? Do you feel what the effect was of having to move to the attic, do those incredibly silly shows with Sandberg and Forte voicing inanimate objects? The impact of that on late night as a whole now.
I mean, I feel like Amber always was silly no matter what. I don't think that it is the things she brought to the table were always the kind of fun and loose, and that's why I think they worked particularly well, whether there was an audience or not. But I do feel like I never would have known that would have been one of the byproducts of it. But I feel like this is the purest version of what I think is funny that I've ever done on the show before. And I would have told you 2 years ago, this is the purest version. But, you know, you take out an audience and you kind of force yourself to find ways to perform to no one. And it's amazing how liberating it is.
The only people who have to think it's funny is you. That's it. It used to be like you and them and the audience and blah, and the test audience, but now it's just you. It's a laser focus of doofiness, and you really learn that your boundaries and that there aren't any.
Yes, right. Like we've like sort of imposed these boundaries on ourselves based on, I think, what the structures of these shows have been for years, and then, you know, for a terrible reason, we got to explore exactly what those boundaries were, and at least there was fun in that. Sal was saying yesterday that he always felt like our show was a sane show for sane people, and then we all went crazy at the same time. And so now it's formerly sane people who are crazy doing a show for formerly sane people who are now crazy. But I thought that was pretty good.
That sounds incredibly accurate. Well, and Amber, for you, you know, how did you decide on the format of the Amber Ruffin Show? Because I really love, you know, it has that silliness, but there's time to get serious. The monologue is really fun, but there's a playfulness that runs throughout the entire show each time.
We really didn't think about the structure at all because we knew we don't have an audience. We're not going to get checked for nothing. Let's just do what we think is the funniest. And then when we were doing that, we found like, oh, okay, we're going to do a monologue. Oh, okay, it's probably a song. I swear to God, I thought I was going to sing one song, and then an adult somewhere was going to be like, you have to stop doing that. No one said anything, so I'm still singing. But like, you know, like that, we found out, oh, there's, we should have like a short, very goofy thing up top with Tarek. So you know who Tarek is. And, you know, very slowly this stuff is falling into place. And it is the best science experiment, you know, and we really lucked out because we were like, let's always have someone say goodbye at the end, and let's always do a monologue at the top. And when you do those things, you earn all kinds of goofiness. And so that's what we do. We have those two bookends to make it seem like we were being normal, but we were not.
Please keep the songs and musical numbers coming.
Okay, I mean, you said it. I'll do it, but dang.
I also think that, you know, it's not a format thing, but the thing that Amber has always provided so much value to late night with is her ability to be really upbeat and cheery, and people like her right away. And then she sneaks in like a very terrible truth about the world that you are strangely more open to receiving because it was coming to Amber. And I think that one of the most impressive things she's done with her show is how effectively that is just slid over from our show to hers. I'm starting to think it might be more about Amber than maybe anything that had to do with us.
Thank you, Mommy. I mean, who would have thought we would be doing those little serious pieces? We do a bit on the show called How Did We Get Here, which is not unlike Closer Look. And it is the liggity last thing I would have thought I'd be doing. But to do it, I mean, they turned it in. I'm like, oh my gosh, I love learning about this stuff. And now that's just a thing I like.
They're incredibly effective. And Seth, a closer look has become a staple of late night. But I was curious, was there ever at any point at the beginning or, even in the Trump presidency, any pushback from the network to devoting so much airtime to just like discussing current events or like a deep dive into politics?
No, I do think, by the way, had the audience not liked it, the network would have let us know. I do think they look at data and whatnot. And we just had really good retention, from the Tonight Show, even though our first act became sort of a 20, oftentimes minute long check-in with the day's politics. So, I don't think a network is beyond giving a note based on what you're doing, but I think more often than not, it's based on how the audience is voting. So fortunately for us, our audience stuck around once we started doing that. And to be honest, the feedback we got was, it seemed like a more authentic version of my show when we started doing that, as opposed to maybe more conventional late night desk pieces.
Well, and there was almost an obligation for it to be about Trump every single time because of all the nonsense that his administration put through. So there was some degree of anticipation once he was out of like, what would a closer look be? What would it feel like? Did the creation and execution of it change at all for you beyond, swapping Rudy Giuliani for Owen Wilson and Vince Vaughn?
That's a 1-for-1 trade right there. I mean, those are pretty good. Everybody wants to see both. That's the thing. Sal was even saying as well, like, he doesn't miss Trump, but it is really nice when Rudy comes back.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that the whole, what are late night shows going to do after Trump, kind of went a little out the window because of COVID and the fact that, Trump's not over. It's, in fact, yeah. I think that's the worst part, is how not over it is.
Well, we don't miss him. I wouldn't trade it. Like, I don't want better jokes than him back. So.
Right. But so I think Trump, the idea is still happening. But, I think in a really nice way that while our show was a lot about Donald Trump for 4 years, our show is now, from a night to night basis, more about our show. It's not like navel gazing or anything like that, but I think there's a consistency now in, hey, these are the kind of jokes we like to make. And we're also going to talk about the news, but there's a freedom. And it was always our hope is that post-Trump, there would be more room for just silliness.
Cicada.
There's nothing silly about a giant. Bro, we had true story. Amber, you didn't hear this. I ran into Christine Baranski this weekend.
Did you?
I did. And I was with my mom, who, like, my mom just assumes everybody watches my show. I should say, my mom assumes everybody watches Corrections, I guess. And so my mom says, I hope you're keeping your voice in shape for Cicada. And Christine Baranski is like, whatever are you talking about? But anyway, she signed up. She's going to do a minimum a year.
Amazing. Well, and to that point, Amber, you mentioned How Did We Get Here, which I think is a really wonderful segment. You said you didn't expect it to become a thing that happened every single show. So what was kind of the inception of that? And then what were kind of the decisions that went into keeping it going?
There is this guy, Michael Harriet, on Twitter who will write these threads about history. And it's always some stuff you had no idea about. And it's always Black history. And it's always just great, because the way it feels learning about Black history is so special. It's a part of you that you didn't know existed, but you could feel it. You know what I mean? And so those pieces were always so cool. And I thought, maybe we could do something like that on the show. And then the first one he wrote just blew my mind. And then he was like, I got these shits for days. So he wrote more and we loved them. And then we quickly had more than we had shows for. And we were like, well, maybe this is a every show thing. And for now it is. Who knows what's going to happen? But yeah, we did not expect that at all. But our show likes to just tell the truth. And when people are saying crazy things about Black people, I love to say, oh, well, here are some receipts for that ass, So How Did We Get Here is just a beautiful way to do that. And now it's become kind of its own thing. So maybe we'll keep it forever or never do it again.
I love it. I say keep it coming.
Oh, okay. You're in charge, Adam.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, late night as a format has always, at least in my experience, whenever terrible events happen in real life, you kind of turn to whichever program is kind of your favorite to kind of deal with what's going on. I think about Jon Stewart on The Daily Show after 9/11. And you guys, in the wake of George Floyd's murder, turned the show over to Amber. And I was kind of wondering what the conversations were that led to that. And kind of, I guess, making that decision and putting that forth on your show, because I felt it was really powerful and a really strong statement from you all.
When that happened, I wrote a sketch and I was like, at the end of the day, I was like, ooh, this isn't right. And then the next day I wrote a different thing. And at the end of that day, I was like, ooh, the tone changed so quickly. George Floyd started a revolution and it took 2.5 days. And so in that time, it went from, oh man, here's another horrible thing, to the world must change. And so I wrote that sketch and it changed and changed and changed and changed and changed. And then I was like, you know what? I could just tell a story I have. And Seth and she were like, great. And I was like, well, okay. So the story is that they're like, great. Just tell the story. I was like, oh, okay. So I told my story. It took as much time as I wanted. And then it went well in the show. And I said, after we shot it, I was like, I have a lot of these, so we can open how many ever shows you want with stories like this for me and the cops. And I shouldn't say that. The true number is 7, but 7 terrible stories is a lot of stories.
There are certain things that happen on our show where, we always think this will come across so much better if it's an authentic point of view from, depending on the story, from Amber, from Jenny, from Karen, from people who are far more connected to it than I am. And, it's a burden we put on someone like Amber at a time like that to say, hey, this awful thing happened. You mind handling it for us? And yet she came to us with, as she said, the tone was really hard to hit and it was perfect. And we were so happy. Not that she had 7 total stories. 4 was ideal because that would fill out a week. But the last 3 we felt were overkill. No, but we appreciated as soon as Amber suggested that would be the right way to handle an impossible to handle week.
Well, and I think it's a testament to Late Night, the show, that didn't feel out of place. It's a different kind of late night series, and that it's not necessarily about kind of fluffing the celebrities or playing games every week. It's a show that tackles current events. Has that been, I know you found that groove pretty early on, but has that been kind of a guiding light in terms of like, what do we do now and how do we address this?
Well, the best thing that happened was having a writing staff that also was really good at coming out as themselves and addressing things, and the fact that wasn't the first time our audience saw them. It's more effective if you're introduced to, say, Karen Chi in a segment, What Does Karen Know? That then when she comes out to talk about violence against Asian Americans, you as the audience sort of know her as a friend now, as opposed to just someone who is behind the scenes. I'm really happy that we kind of had laid the groundwork. It wasn't the reason we were laying the groundwork, but, we want you to know our writing staff so that, when the time comes, you're willing to listen to them. And if there's ever, I think if there's ever violence against, white men in tank tops, that would be a time where
Collins will step to the forefront for
right.
America and get beat up.
I think that's perfectly valid. Amber, I was curious because I know you work on both shows. How do you juggle those responsibilities, especially on a show week when you're doing the Amber Ruffin Show the same week?
I always, sometimes people go, well, how do you decide which this goes on Seth's show and which thing goes on? When I think of the idea, I pitch it as quickly as possible. In my mind, and I know this isn't true, but like the second you come up with an idea, it starts to die. So I like try as best as I can to get it out there. And so usually on Sunday, whatever I come up with, I'll pitch on late night. And then if they take it, great. If they don't, later on that same day, I'll pitch it to Amber Ruffin Show. And then whatever's left over, we read on Thursday. So I don't have it down yet. But also, like, there's not a whole lot of, it's not like Seth was stopping me from being my blackest. These people don't care. What goes on my show, you know, a lot of times is fine, can live on Seth's show. So there isn't a lot of like, you know, like me and Tarek see who can fart the loudest. Okay, that maybe that can't go on like Seth. But lots of other stuff can.
Depends on who the guest is.
Amber is contractually obligated. If something happens in the news and her initial reaction to it is to say what? She's contractually obligated to do that on our show. That's the one thing that we insist upon.
It happens a lot.
Well, speaking of recurring bits, now that I have both of you on here, I've always kind of been curious about the origins of jokes Seth Can't Tell. How did that begin? Because that's become such a great recurring bit.
Well, it's my story, so I'd love to tell it. I just don't.
Excuse me.
Amber?
It started with Jenny. Jenny was writing all these lesbian jokes, and Baze, the head writer, was like, "These are great. Seth can't tell them." So that gave her the idea for her and I to just write a bunch of Black and lesbian jokes in a segment called Jokes Seth Can't Tell. And she came to me with this idea, and I was like, we should write it for the read on Thursday so that we can all laugh, because there's no way we can do this on television. And then we read it, everybody doubled over, cried, laughing, loved it so bad. And so then I was like, oh, that was fun. It gets put in the show. And I was like, oh no, we read through it with Seth. At the end, Seth goes, it's just like my grandpa always said, Black women and lesbians are liars. And we are crying, laughing. I go, that's so hilarious. There's no way that is going to be said on national television. We do it on TV. So he said, Black women and lesbians are liars. The audience is like, I was like, oh, I was wrong this whole way around. The whole way around, I had it wrong. But yeah, that's how it happened. It was all Jenny. And the audience will go with you on a journey.
I do. It's one of the few things where I acutely feel the absence of the audience, not the jokes that work, but watching even Amber. It's very hard for Amber to tell a joke where no one will go along with her. And it happens a few times on Jokes Seth Can't Tell. And it's one of my favorites.
The thing about Jokes Seth Can't Tell is I will be like, I want to tell this joke. And Seth will be like, that joke isn't going to do well. And I'll go, you don't know. And then I'll do it. And he's never wrong. And the audience will greet me with silence. And I'll look at Seth, and Seth will look at me. And I'll do it again the next time.
It's so, a lot of times the audience is peppered with my people, Amber, and I feel as though I have a good sense of their comfort level. I watched do you remember Connor O'Malley used to do Anniversary Guy?
Yes.
And we were watching old Anniversary Guys, and he did the thing where he read off a piece of paper and he said the year was 2016, and he said a couple things, and the punchline was, and Rachel Dolezal was making America laugh with her race-based comedy. And there was a Black woman sitting behind Connor, and she just went like this. And it made me so happy. I sent it to Connor. I'm like, this is you can use this if the world ever turns on you.
You guys, Rachel Dolezal was my number one favorite punchline. I don't think anything will ever be that funny because it's real. It really happened. She was great at doing black hair. She did black hair. Every hairstyle she did was perfection. And she was also horrible. It's great. It's great. She's my favorite. So much so that I had to get surgery and I was very sad. And the writer's room got a cameo ordered a cameo from Rachel Dolezal. They had told Rachel Dolezal that I was going to compete in the Sochi Olympics. This is 2 years after the Sochi Olympics, and it was not winter. And she said her cameo was like, Amber, your coworkers are really excited for you to represent our country in the Olympics. It's my favorite present I've ever received.
Well, I'm almost out of time with you guys. Seth, I am obligated to ask, is there any positive update on the new season of documentary now?
Yes, we're working on scripts. We just had a Zoom call that we were all going to get on, but we had to reschedule it because Bill had forgotten it was his birthday.
That makes sense.
That's the kind of efficiency we're dealing with over at Talk Now.
Great. Any sort of timeline of like, it hasn't been, I'm sure it hasn't been shot yet. You guys are in the middle of writing.
No, we would, the plan is to shoot in the fall.
Okay. I'm
yeah.
eagerly anticipating that with all the other, or I should say Criterion Collection approved documentary now.
Twice now. I think, I think Co-op is on a DVD extra now. And I think Globesman is a DVD extra as well. Yeah.
Well, finally, I wanted to ask you guys, I know you're both fans of each other's work, and I was just curious if you both would, if you had a favorite thing about each other's show, if you wanted to share that.
Yeah, I would say my favorite thing about Late Night Seth, I mean, it got crazy and never went back. Like, I can't wait to see, I mean, we joke, oh, we don't go with crazy. Seth is like, I know Seth, so I know that he's very wild and goofy. And now I feel like everybody knows because he just let it loose. And that, I think, is my favorite new thing. Like, corrections, as much as it's a horrible idea and terrible and bad for him as a human being and spirit, it is him in his natural state. And a lot more of that, is coming through in the Sea Captain and goofy stuff and Scollins Burning and Cicada Staccato. All that stuff is shining through now. And I cannot wait to see how it's going to live with the audience. Like, what's going to happen? Are they going to let you act like this? What are the rules? I can't wait.
I'm gonna bring a plastic. It won't be a real gun, but I'll every time they don't laugh at a bit, I'm just gonna point at my head.
I'm gonna go,
I
can't wait to see corrections with an audience.
Oh, well, we'll never do corrections for an audience. I'm getting them straight out of there. I not to harken back, but How Did We Get Here is for me a perfect distillation about what I love about Amber. And I think there's really unfair thing, and Amber has talked about this before. Just every time something terrible happens to Black people, white people will call her and ask her how they should think about it or what they should do. Is that accurate, Amber?
A little bit.
And it's really unfair to ask that of someone. And yet, that's what Amber is kind of doing. And that is what I appreciate, is it's not fair for her to have to walk us through things like that, especially really difficult things. But no one is better to go on that journey with. And she did it with her fantastic book that she wrote with her sister, Lacey, which I highly recommend to everybody. And so while it's not fair to ask Amber to do that, it is not surprising to me that Amber would take that on and do that for all of us.
Yay. And that's how we got here.
Oh, gross.
Well, thank you guys so much for doing this. I'm such a huge fan of your work, and both of your shows have been kind of a nice balm during a tough time for a lot of people, especially as they just got increasingly insane. So, yeah.
Well, if I can have the last word, this has been a closer look.
Dang it.